Our next speaker is from Ireland, where I also come from. He's called Ricochet. He's a very famous person in Ireland, but he also has epilepsy, and we need celebrities who will talk about their epilepsy. And Rick has been a great advocate and a great speaker on behalf of people with epilepsy for many, many years now. So, Rick.
Thank you. I'm not half as famous as Mike makes me out to be, but thank you, Mike. Anyway, the affiliations slide, which left just before there and went through slightly too quickly, I don't have any. My only affiliations that I really think I should disclose are those to Liverpool FC, jazz and classical music. I like Eggs Benedict, a decent second-hand bookstore if I can find one. I've developed a thing for smoked meat since I came to. I'd never had smoked meat prior to. I don't care what you put in it. If that's made of cardboard and baling twine, and I don't care. I like smoked meat. And I wanted to speak a little French, mainly because I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to do it at one of these in front of a room full of people. Mon français c'est très pauvre, mais je parle un peu de français, comme je voudrais une bière, s'il vous plaît. Et je voudrais une autre bière, s'il vous plaît. Un verre de vin rouge, peut-être, no? And then when you've done a few of those, obviously slightly later on, the all-important, excusez-moi, où est les toilettes? It's not the limit, but it's all I can do in front of a room full of people like this. This slide here shows you who I am and what I do. As Mike said to you, I'm a broadcaster in Ireland. I work for RTE, which is the state broadcaster where I come from. My name is Rick. I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a health professional. I'm not a man who runs an organization, to be honest with you. As you can see from me, I don't even really own a suit. I've had epilepsy since I was 16. I've turned 40 this year. And as Mike has said, I've been the patron in Ireland of Epilepsy Ireland for, I think it's 7 years now. The years keep rolling on. Ever since we were Brainwave and before we changed our name relatively recently. I got involved with them. The story as to how I ended up becoming the patron of the charity it's actually kind of a sad one and says a lot about the human condition. I've been on radio for almost 20 years now, and I've been with the state broadcaster for the last 13. I just present national radio shows every day. And I saw an article in one of our national newspapers where the then Epilepsy Ireland said that they were looking for a public face. They were looking for somebody who would potentially, as Mike has said, a famous person, and I use those with, I hope the air quotes are showing quite big on the screen behind me. I don't consider myself famous. I'm definitely not a celebrity, but they were looking for somebody who had a high profile, who would be somebody that people could look at and say, that guy, yeah, you know, that guy who does whatever, he has epilepsy. And people would go, oh, okay. And anything else I could do for them over the course of the last number of years. So I saw the article in the newspaper. They did a photo shoot of a bunch of guys who were involved at the time, and they had a silhouette with a big question mark inside it going, you know, Epilepsy Ireland looking for a patron. And I immediately knew it had to be me because I didn't want anybody else taking that job off me. That was my job. I didn't care who else was more famous than me. I rarely develop those things in life, and I immediately said, this has to be me. I hadn't really spoken about having epilepsy prior to that. Not because I concealed it, really. I didn't in my personal life and in my work life. I'm just one of those people who works in the media who kind of doesn't really talk about their personal life when it comes to anything at all. So I got in contact with the guys. I fully presumed there would be somebody far more important than me. There'd be a list of people that I would be about 12 down. And eventually when I came in and had the meeting with the guys, they said, well, you were the only person who applied for the job. So I ended up becoming the patron of the charity by default, and it's been 7 wonderful years of default ever since. Didn't make that up, true story. I've done a few of these speeches like this where I'm brought on as the token civilian, if you will, in a situation like this. Somebody who's not, you know, a clinician, or somebody who doesn't have slides or information to bring you, information of any kind, let's be honest. You might have seen me I did one in Marseille a few years ago, in Malta, in the European Parliament in Brussels, but it's the first time I've ever been asked to do a PowerPoint presentation for one of these. I've been angsting over this for quite some time. I've seen PowerPoints. I'm quite a tech-savvy person, but I'm no good at imagery. So I don't have diagrams, I don't have statistical data for you, I don't have bar charts, I don't have anything that I can bring you. So I just Googled what people most like images of, and I came up with cats. That's the response I was hoping for, frankly. I had a terrible moment where I thought, I'm going to end up with the only audience in the world who doesn't Google cute cat pictures. I'm good, that's okay. And that explains why you're going to like that one even more. Maybe another one, just in case. To be honest with you, the worried email I got from the organizers when I sent them my slideshow initially, and they said, cat pictures, are you sure? And I said, cat, just, let's run with the cat pictures for a while. There might be one later if you're very good, okay? I know it's early on a Monday morning as well. Stephen Hawking said, if you've ever read A Brief History of Time, he says that when he was writing the book, he was told that for every equation that he included in it, it would halve the sales of the book. So for what I'm about to do with you here, there is pretty much zero science involved in it, in the hope that everybody stays in the room until the time I'm finished. It's probably the only talk that's going to be given to you as well, written on a series of index cards that I scribbled on a flight on the way over here from Heathrow 2 days ago. I was really just asked to tell you about my experience since I was 16, as being somebody who just lives with it every day. I developed epilepsy without any warning. There was no history of it in my family, to be honest with you. My family didn't even know what epilepsy was. I turned 40 this year, so it's 24 years ago in Ireland, and whilst the profile of epilepsy is thankfully much higher these days, 24 years ago, it was something that huge tracts of people had no idea what it was. We were still in the era of, do you put a wooden spoon in your mouth when you have a seizure? To be honest with you, I've still had a few people say that to me recently, and every time I have the calm conversation going, no, there's no wooden spoons. Let me tell you what you're supposed to do in a situation like that. I was 16 years old. It was Christmas Eve. I was playing a board game with my brother. My brother's 3 years younger than me, so he was 13, I was 16. I have the big grand tonic-clonic seizures, the big spectacular ones where, I'm standing talking to you nice people, and next thing you know, I wake up with a crowd of people around me asking me, am I okay? According to what my mother tells me, because obviously I wasn't there and I don't remember any of this, I stood up, I got a slightly strange look on my face, and I then keeled over and took the Christmas tree with me, like that. You are allowed to laugh at that. It's funny after all this time, to the point where, oh, I lost one of my things. How do I go back in this? Can I go back? Is it that? No, it's not that. I've lost a slide, Mike. Can I go back this way? Wait, here we go. No, never mind. Wait, there it is. There you go. I meant to go forward instead of back. I'd like to emphasize this isn't an actual picture my mother took of me after I'd had a seizure and took the Christmas tree over. She's not that cruel. She's a lovely lady. All she did say to me many years later was, and it's easy for her to say it many years later, was, you were always very dramatic as a child. I'm glad the Irish mother accent works in Canada as well. I wasn't hugely sure about that too. I've been medicated ever since. I was once seizure-free for 7 years, and it just reappeared with a vengeance for no apparent reason. Over the last 10 years or so, I've had seizures about once every 18 months, roughly. I'm fairly well medicated, and touch podium, the last one I had was 3 years ago. So whilst it's different than the experience of a lot of other people that I meet when I come to conferences, or people who I even talk to simply because I'm a public figure who has epilepsy in my country, I consider myself hugely lucky. They wanted me to talk about my school experience as well. I should stress this is not an actual picture of me in school. I didn't have a beard when I was 7 years old. I haven't always looked like I was 40. From the beginning of it when I was 16, I was doing my senior exams, what would be the equivalent of the baccalaureate in France, or ending my high school exams in the States. I had two choices, I suppose, and when I was a kid, and my parents were both the same way, we had a choice between being quite covert about epilepsy and about what had happened once there was a diagnosis, or being quite stroppy and being quite upfront about it, and I was always that sort of person. So I was lucky I had a school principal who was a very decent guy at the time. We went in, sat down, had the conversation, and he simply said, okay, what can we do to help? I know it's an experience that not everybody who has epilepsy has been through, but mine was pretty lucky. And I managed to make my way through the rest of school in a very decent way with a lot of half-decent friends. And you do kind of figure out sometimes who your real friends are, who the ones that, you know, hang around with you, and those people who are genuinely your actually closest friends. I mean, once you get beyond that, you end up talking about employment. I didn't realize this was animated. I've never seen that animated before. Okay. Again, I was faced with two choices, and every time I've ever gone to a new job anywhere, I've been that guy who said, okay, when we're having the conversation about a new job, by the way, you might want to know this. And I've been lucky in that I've never come across an employer who said that might be an issue. I mean, I've also been lucky in terms of I do live radio every day. I've done live radio pretty much 5 days a week for the last 20 years, out of which I've only ever once had a seizure while I was on air. They're pretty good statistics. The story in and of itself is one of those ones that you are allowed to laugh at this story. Please feel free to if you feel the inclination. I was doing a late night radio show at the time. It's actually the only time I've ever injured myself as well. I must have decided I needed to take a very short toilet break. So as you do when you work in live radio, you just play quite a long song. Anything by Meatloaf is usually quite good. Anything by Led Zeppelin fits in the bracket. And I'd obviously gone out, and I was coming back. I had a seizure, obviously, in the corridor outside where the radio station was, and I keeled over backwards and cracked the back of my head on a concrete wall. So, being the true professional that I am, I evidently woke up after my seizure with a bleeding head wound, and the first thing I thought was, I must make sure there's a song on the radio. I must get over shortly. So the first thing I did was I went back in, made sure there was music playing on the radio. I'm quite fuzzy-headed when I come out of seizures as well for a while. I don't instantly snap out. I act like I'm a little drunk for a while afterwards. So the guy who was due to come in following me came into the studio just to say hi, realized I was bleeding from a head wound, wondered what had gone on. I said, no, I'm okay, I'm fine, everything's been all right. And he said, no, you're bleeding from a head wound. I think we're going to take you to a doctor. And that's exactly what happened. In fairness, the second time, I also did the true professional thing, which was I've only ever had another seizure, and it was while I was off air. I'd done a radio show, and literally 45 seconds after we'd finished and we'd gone off air, I dropped like that and had a seizure. There's some internal mechanism in me, touch podium, that allows that to happen over the course of my working career. I'm also conscious I'm one of those people who says something like that out loud, and then it's going to happen to me next Tuesday, but we'll see how that goes. Perceptions of you when you are somebody who has epilepsy, and particularly when it's quite upfront and quite publicly known about you, are an interesting one. Having said that, this slide is far more entertaining. I didn't put this slide in here. I just asked for something to do with perceptions. Instead of that, they seem to have given me pictures of 6 people who all have problems with some things in life. I mean, the girl up in the top left-hand corner is quite bored with this presentation I'm giving right now. The girl in the middle, I think I've stood on her foot. I'm not hugely sure about that. The guy on the right-hand side thinks I've just offered to buy him a beer. I wasn't sure about the guy at the bottom left-hand corner. I think that he thinks I've just broken wind. And the guy in the bottom middle definitely thinks I've just attempted to chat up his sister. Bottom right-hand corner, I wasn't hugely sure about it. She's obviously thinking about something else that's not the presentation that I'm giving right now. Perceptions are interesting in that I suppose I haven't come across negative ones as often as most people would have. I know that the title of this is that my epilepsy doesn't define me, but I suppose because of what I do in my country, it kind of does. I've put myself out there as a figurehead at the front of the boat, so everybody knows who I am and what I do, and more importantly, that you're that guy who has epilepsy. There's not a lot of us knocking around in Ireland. We're a small enough country of 4-odd million people, and there are relatively few people who are willing to publicly discuss, even these days, that they have epilepsy. There are other people who do have epilepsy, but relatively few who are willing to discuss it. So the perceptions that I get from people are mostly good ones, and are mostly complimentary, and are mostly usually about people's own experiences. It's about people who have, a brother or a family member or someone that they know who's had it, and they want to come and have just a chat with you about it. As part of being involved with Epilepsy Ireland, it's been such an extraordinarily good thing in my life as well. It's allowed me to do things that wouldn't necessarily have happened in my life. It's why I'm one of those people who, and a couple of people have asked me about whether or not they should consider doing what I do on a public level, and I've only ever found it to be a positive thing. I'll show you this. This is this won't mean anything to anybody apart from maybe Mike, Peter, and a couple of other people in the room. This is a picture I took while I was sitting in the chair on the largest chat show in our country. The Late Late Show is the longest running chat show in the world. It's been running for slightly over 50 years now, and it runs every Friday night in Ireland. It's the one program that's watched more than anything else in our country. And I was asked onto it recently in the context of having epilepsy. Obviously, you're not supposed to be taking pictures while live television is going on, but I'm sure they were shooting something in the other direction, and I just looked like the weirdo with the camera who was taking pictures out from there. The Late Late Show had only covered epilepsy, and Mike told the story of this. Probably the last time they covered epilepsy, there were no actual records as to when it was done as a discussion on the show. The last time was at some point in the 1970s, when some of the participants were actually behind screens and were only shown in shadow because they didn't want their identities known, and they certainly didn't want a national television audience seeing that they were people who had epilepsy. We've come a long way, certainly I think in my country since then. This is the picture from the other direction. That gentleman on the left is Ryan Tubridy, who's the chat show host. I'm the one on the right, and if anybody knows rugby at all, the gentleman in the middle is Joe Schmidt, the man who's just become the new Ireland rugby coach. He wasn't there talking about himself. Joe has a son who has quite severe epilepsy, and decided through family that he wanted to come out and talk about what it was like living with a child who had epilepsy, and they brought me on as being somebody who had epilepsy. To be honest with you, we were on for about 12 minutes on that chat show, and I think more people have come up and discussed that with me than 20 years of being on the radio ever. It was one of those things that I think has given us a greater light in our country, and you can only do that through something that's that large. I brought some other token stuff to finish off with, really, just because it's fun. We did a fundraising night for Epilepsy Ireland recently. Lady on the left she's a TD in our country. She's a political representative. Gentleman in the middle is both a businessman, and he's the star of Dragon's Den. I don't know if they have. It depends. In some countries they have Dragon's Den. He's one of the guys who's on Dragon's Den in our country. We did a cookery night to raise funds for Epilepsy Ireland. I like this picture because it makes me look as if I know what I'm doing, and I haven't got a clue. As we say in our country, I haven't got a bog's notion what I'm doing, but it's a good picture and it makes it look like I'm not poisoning people. This is what you think it is. It's me with a baton in the middle of an orchestra. It's one of those strange things about having, I think it's almost a side effect of having had epilepsy and having been somebody who's been out there and quite public for a while, is you don't have any fear when it comes to public things like this. It was terrifying enough learning how to conduct an orchestra and standing in front of them like this, doing it at the National Concert Hall in my country, when I don't speak, I don't do any kind of music. I've never read music. I don't play any musical instrument. And it took the gentleman who's the real conductor about 2 days to teach me to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I couldn't keep time with a baton. And eventually one night I ended up in the National Concert Hall doing the James Bond theme tune, because it's nice and simple. Nothing more complicated. I wasn't doing Mozart or Brahms or anything. And the last one I have for you here is this. Again, as part of creating a profile for Epilepsy Ireland in our country, I was asked would I go on Mastermind. Now, probably if you're from the UK, you know what Mastermind is. I don't know how many other places it's been franchised in the world. It's a quiz show, but it's one of those quiz shows where people play 15 rounds of it, and at the end, you don't end up with a cash prize. You get a nice glass bowl. And you get simply the honor of... You can laugh, genuinely, please do, because it's such a rarity these days that people play games like this just for the honor of being on something like this. It's a quiz show they run every year in the UK. They franchised it out to Ireland last year, and they just did one session of it, which was, again, celebrity mastermind. I use the word lightly. You get to do a round of general knowledge, and then you pick a specialist subject: the American Civil War, world flags, the history of the TV show, The West Wing, whatever. It was one of those things that's on my bucket list, along with becoming an astronaut, accepting an Oscar, I managed to do this one, whereas the other ones are never going to happen. And ultimately, I played 2 rounds for Epilepsy Ireland, and we raised quite a lot of money and quite a lot of profile. And I ended up winning the thing at the end. And I had that giant piece of that quite nice piece of glass stuff at home. And I'm now quite embarrassed because I realise I'm wearing the same T-shirt today as I'm wearing in that picture from a year and a half ago. I didn't really think that one through. Finally, I just want to say it's been an honour to be here today. This is easily the largest room of people I've ever spoken to in the context of epilepsy. I've done things for work where I've had a crowd of 100,000 people in front of me, which was introducing bands, but this is genuinely the most people I've ever spoken to in one room about epilepsy. And merci de me de parler dans mon pauvre français de vous. I was asked at the end to maybe come up with one image that would define my experience and my life with epilepsy since I was 16 years old, and what it had meant to me and how it had all come together. And it took a long time trying to figure out that from the last 24 years. It was too hard, and I ended up coming up with another cat picture for you. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.